I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you guys for assembling such a great group of people from such a different array of places, all of whom basically care about kids and education. And it's a pretty amazing cast. And what I was going to say is if you sit here and listen to the various presentations during the day, we are at a pretty rare defining moment, I think, when it comes to kids, education, technology, and media. And if you step back here in from all the hoopla here in Las Vegas, and all the 3D television announcements, and all of the new gadgets that we can all see, I would argue that by far the most important stuff that's being talked about at the entire CES conference is happening here in this room. Because ultimately, the people who will both create and consume the technology and the media that we're all talking about are young people. And so it is a rare, rare moment. And I would argue that the people in this room and some of the presenters today and some of the audience are really sort of the new force, the shock troops in building a new social movement around using technology, media, and other forms of stuff that all throughout CES we're hearing about to change the lives of kids and the education system in the United States. For 30 seconds of background, Common Sense Media, the organization which I run, is focused on three fundamental things. We rate, we educate, and we advocate. So we rate all media and technology, from movies, TV, video games, websites, books, music, apps, et cetera. We do that for tens of millions of people each year, tens of millions of users. We have now built digital literacy programs that are in well over 5,000 schools in the United States in the last year alone, and that we hope, with the help of some of the folks who are here today, we will put in every school in the United States. And then finally, we're a big public policy voice. We're a nonpartisan public policy leadership voice around the issues that focus on media and technology's impact on kids, period, because there needs to be that. And many of the best thinkers and leaders in this space are here today. So you have this great assembled cast. You have some of the most interesting, creative people who've touched on everything from creativity to online safety to diversity in this ever-changing world. And again, I would argue that what we're talking about here is not just more important than just about anything else that's being talked about at CES, but I would argue in the long run is more important than people with underwear bombers, what's going on in the healthcare debate, and Afghanistan. And I won't tell you why. Because this is basically the future of the world and of our society that's getting discussed. And digital media and technology have the chance to transform that. And two quick things before I introduce our next speaker, which is why most of you guys are probably here. And they're basically a challenge to you. And Michael Levine and other colleagues discussed this with us at Google about a month and a half ago. And there are two challenges that I think we all ought to think about in the big picture context of why we're here today. The first is a challenge to say that every child in this country ought to be digitally literate by the time they graduate from 8th grade, period. This is their future. So yes, you can clap. I totally agree on that. But every kid in this country, no matter where they're from, who they are, needs to be digitally literate. By the way, they will be in countries around the rest of the world, so they sure as heck ought to be here in Nevada, in California, where I live, and around the world. So that should be a fundamental national priority that we should hear about. And the second thing that I think we're going to have to do, because a lot of parents and even educators today, including myself, are somewhat Luddites when it comes to the world that our kids are living in. I mean, my 5-year-old programs my iPhone better than I do. That is true. But I think we have to build a massive public education, public awareness effort aimed at adults. You know, when you talk about digital literacy, you can't just talk about the kids. That's who we really have to educate, obviously, to build a 21st century education system and a 21st century future. But you got to educate adults, too. A lot of the stuff you guys have been talking about today, parents and grandparents and teachers need to understand. So there has to be a major public awareness effort to educate our fellow citizens and parents and teachers about if we're going to take advantage of this transformational moment. So we are at a transformational moment, and then I think here's the really great news. If you could ask me if there was one person in the country who could have the most impact on this, I guess I would say it would be the President of the United States. And actually, I think in the case of our parent-in-chief, we actually have someone who gets this, who has kids in the right age range, and who's young enough to understand digital technology and some of the topics we've been talking about today. So perhaps it's the President of the United States who has the biggest impact on all of us in terms of bringing the country forward in the ways we need to. But if it's anybody else, it's the person who I'm about to introduce, Julius Genachowski, who is the new chairman of the FCC. And for this, what I really think is a transformative and historical moment around these issues, it's amazing that we're fortunate enough to have Julius in the chairmanship of the FCC, because we need his leadership in a way that we've never needed leadership from the FCC before. And let me give you a tiny bit of background about him. First and foremost, he is the father of 3 kids, including a football star, teenage football star, and 2 younger kids. And so first and foremost, he is a dad. He happens to have been a friend of mine for much of the last 20 years. And so I have seen him in all of that time as a devoted father. And I will tell you, and we've been talking with some of the other presenters and audience here today, if you're a parent, you get this stuff in a unique way because it's transforming your kids' lives every single day. Well, it's transformed the Genachowski kids' lives, whether Julius likes it or not. But that's what makes it, that's one of the huge aspects of his leadership. But the other things that you need to know about him is, first of all, he's an extraordinary legal scholar. He's the only guy I know, and I'm a civil rights lawyer who teaches law at Stanford, too. And Julius is the only guy I know who clerked for 2 different U.S. Supreme Court justices. So if you're a lawyer, you would know that means you're a pretty smart guy. So he's definitely a really smart guy. And the other thing is, from the standpoint of technology and media and education and kids, he spent time on both the public sector. He introduced me and my colleagues to the field of children and media about 15 years ago when he was the chief counsel to Reed Hundt, then chairman of the FCC, and they were trying to put the regulations in for the Children's Television Act. So Julius has been doing this for 15 years in the public sector, but he also spent 8 to 10 years in the private sector working at IAC and being one of the really strategic business leaders in this world. So he has both public and private sector experience, but fundamentally, he's an incredibly devoted dad, and that's why we should be pleased that Julius Genachowski is the chairman of the FCC and can usher in this extraordinary new era of digital media and kids. With that, Julius Genachowski.
Thanks.
Off with the mic.
First of all, I have been around this area for a little while, and in the time I've been involved, I've watched Jim Steyer for, I thought it was more than 15 years. I think we're both much older than we look, I'll tell you that. Thinking, educating, fighting, acting for kids. And I just want to ask everyone for a round of applause for Jim Steyer and his hard and terrific work for such a long time. And I want to acknowledge some other people who are here. I see Joel Gurin, who is the new chief of the Consumer Bureau at the FCC. Joined us very recently from Consumer Reports, not directly from Consumer Reports. Was involved in a different nonprofit, but was the person at Consumer Reports who brought Consumer Reports online. We're very lucky to have Joel at the FCC, as we are to have some other people who are here and not here. Yul Kwan is Joel's deputy at the Consumer Bureau, very engaged in these issues, worked very hard on this event, and his plane didn't take off. So he's not here, but in absentia we acknowledge and thank him. And there's some other folks from the FCC who are here too, all of whom are committed to doing the right thing for the country, especially when it relates to kids. Eddie Lazarus, the Chief of Staff of the FCC, is here. Bruce Gottlieb. Colin Kroll is here. Colin, who worked for even longer than Jim Steyer and I have on these issues, who worked on the Children's Television Act at its birth, may have personally given birth to the Children's Television Act when he worked for Congressman Markey, who's been a real hero in this area for such a long time. I see great friends in the room like Vicki Rideout and others. So I'm privileged to be here. If this group can't figure these things out, then we have a problem. This is a time of unprecedented challenge around kids and media and unprecedented opportunity. On the challenge, the world is a different place now than the one that many of us in this room, not all, I see some young folks here, grew up in. But, you know, when I was a troublemaking little kid, my parents had to worry about TV. They did. And, you know, basically they had to worry about